Hi, anyone and everyone. Welcome to Have You Heard About This Case? My name is Sam.
And my name is Kelly.
Today's case was discussed quite a bit a few months ago during its trial. We didn't talk about it at that point, but it definitely got a decent amount of coverage. But I have been waiting to cover it because I've been waiting
Hmm.
for some recent updates that I knew were coming. And,
Ooh.
surprise, we're in Wisconsin. So going back home for this. But before we get into it, what's our
Yeah.
question?
Okay, so I have been sucked into the Olympics rabbit hole, and I was wondering if you have too.
I
And
have
if
not.
so,
Not at
no.
all.
Not even the recaps on YouTube?
No, I'll see clips here and there on the news, but I'm not seeking them out.
Oh, I
So
am. I
I feel like I'm the
am.
only one
Do you
who's
have
not.
do you have a favorite one or one that you could be like, I think I could do that if you watched it?
Oh God, I don't even know. Like obviously I enjoy watching gymnastics. I feel like that's everyone's favorite because it's
Yeah.
mind-blowing what they can do. Um
Oh yeah.
but really I've never gotten super into the Olympic Games. Like gymnastics was the only
Mm.
thing as a kid that I would watch.
Yeah. Yeah. And you have Simone Biles and Suni Lee, like they're so good.
Yeah, Simone Biles, like she's from another planet. Her talent is
She
insane.
she is the goat. Like I heard a comedian say, like, she goes so high, I'm surprised she comes back to Earth.
Right. But what's your favorite part of the Olympics?
Okay, my favorite part of the Olympics has nothing to do with sports and everything to do with Snoop Dogg and Flavor Flav.
Assuming
I
they
have
were
been
there.
actively Yes, Flavor Flav is his statement was he's a girl dad because one of the captains of the water polo team reached out and they were not funded, they were not getting anything. So Flavor Flav became the official sponsor of the water polo team and he's
Wow.
paying for everyone to be there and he is in the stands. He says he's the official water polo hype man.
Oh, that's funny. I haven't
And
heard about Flavor Flav in
oh,
years. So the fact that this is the news that I'm hearing about him, I'm like, okay, like that's good. I like that.
do you believe that? I was like, what a pivot from being the hype man for Public Enemy to being the hype man for everybody.
Right?
And then, of course, you have Snoop Dogg, who's like trying out all the sports.
Oh yeah,
He's
that
like
doesn't surprise
fencing
me.
yeah, he's like fencing. He's an NBC correspondent now because everybody went wild for Snoop. And he's like fencing against a master, and you can hear he's a mic in his helmet, and
Oh,
he's like,
that's funny.
"Oh, dog, what's happening? What you doing?"
Oh, I'll have to check that
So
out. That
great.
would be funny.
Oh yeah, just search Snoop Dogg at the Olympics, and I promise you won't be disappointed.
Yeah, I know. I've seen like a couple clips of like him and Martha Stewart recently, but I feel like that's just a common thing
Hmm.
nowadays. So I wasn't sure if that was like a
Hmm.
super recent thing or if that was
Oh
Olympic
yeah,
related.
it was because Snoop Dogg wanted Martha Stewart to come with him because he knew that she rode, and he was scared of horses.
Oh, that's funny.
Snoop D-O-double-G is scared of horses.
I get it. They can be scary.
They're big. They're big. And he's been popping over all over Olympic events. Like they just did breakdancing for the first time as an Olympic sport,
Oh,
and
that's
Snoop
cool.
showed up for that. And like, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I should check some out because it like usually each year I do see some sort of recaps, and this year I just haven't at all.
Let me tell you, the Snoop Dogg Flavor Flav recaps are iconic because he Flavor Flav goes on several talk shows and he talks about how he's a girl dad and he supports women's sports and that there's no reason they shouldn't be sponsored, and he's sponsoring every athlete on the team.
Oh, I do love that. That's fantastic.
I know, I never expected that news out of Flavor Flav,
Right.
but I love it.
Well, let's go ahead and dive into this one. This is kind of a hard case. And as I mentioned, we're back in Wisconsin. And this is a very recent case. It took place in 2022.
Oh, wow.
And it's quite polarizing. So we'll kind of get into why in a little bit. And there's a lot of conflicting statements that were fairly difficult to prove. And a lot of that's because there was a ton of eyewitness testimony. Because there were a lot of eyewitnesses.
Oh, my.
And as we talked about in the past, eyewitness statements aren't always necessarily reliable.
Yes, yes.
And I'm very passionate about this because I'll just say it off the top here. I believe that this whole situation could have been avoided by both parties. And it's very sad because I feel like it didn't have to happen. And that's a huge reason I want to bring it up because we can't change what happened. But I think talking about it has the ability to potentially prevent it from happening in the future.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So the way I'm going to try to go through this is go through what was reported in the news. Because there were so many different conflicting statements, I'm just going to try to go with what was reported, which was kind of scarce for how big of news it was.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, like there were definitely people talking about it, but it's just there weren't many facts to talk about. So we're going to start on July 30th, 2022. It was a beautiful Saturday in Somerset, Wisconsin. And the Apple River was packed with both locals and tourists to go tubing down the river.
Yeah. Fun.
And yeah, tubing is just a common pastime for people in the area. It's really fun. It's relaxing. Yeah. And the Apple River brought a ton of people from Wisconsin and Minnesota because Somerset's right on the border of the states. So it's kind of like a good central location for people in the area to go to.
Yeah.
And for those of you who might not be familiar with river tubing, it's essentially doing a lazy river that's in a water park, but instead on an actual river. Like, it's really kind of it.
Lake people like you and me know exactly what tubing is.
Well, tubing for me is very different, actually. Tubing for me is being pulled behind a boat.
Yes, same.
Yeah,
same.
so this is a very different type of tubing. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, this is a little different. Yeah, I'm used to being pulled behind the boat.
Yeah, this is them just floating down the river. And around this area, Apple River, the shores were around 2 to 3 feet deep. If you were in the center, it was maybe closer to 5. So it was like you could easily get out your tube and walk. It's not like you'd not be able to touch the surface of the bed of the river or anything. So it kind of made it ideal for tubing.
Yeah.
And well, I'm not sure if Apple River is specifically set up like this. But I've been to places that do similar things and do canoeing and kayaking in a same sort of setup where you put your tube in and kind of launch from on the river, you leave your car there. And as you go down, you rent your tubes from a company at the edge of the river there. And then once you kind of get to the end of the route, there's a shuttle that will pick you up and drive you back to your car. So this is actually a business that runs and does this frequently.
Cool.
And it's a fun activity to do with friends. Many people like to purchase extra tubes so that they can put in a cooler in it and bring some drinks along with them and some snacks and things. And while I haven't done this type of tubing, I've gone canoeing with basically the same exact setup quite a bit with friends in the UP. And for us, it would be like an all-afternoon event. We'd only really go a couple miles on the river, but it's just like you very slowly meander along. And we had other friends that would kind of independently go as well, and then we'd all meet up on a sandbar or on the shore for a snack and to get out of the sun.
I love it.
Oh, it's so much fun. I love it.
Yeah.
And this is exactly what friends Isaac Schuman, AJ Martin, Ryhley Mattison, Dante Carlson, and Tony Carlson, along with a handful of other friends, decided to do on July 30th.
Okay.
And the 5 friends were between the ages of 17 and 24. And the additional friends in the group, I don't know exactly how old they were, but they've all kind of been described in the same general age range. So kind of a big age range, but not massive.
Yeah, not too far apart.
Yeah, like it's kind of that age where the 7 years is kind of a big deal. But it's like if you have an older sibling or something, like that could definitely kind of bring you all in as friends with that sort of age range.
Yeah. Yeah, you might get used to it, having older people around.
Yeah. And they were having a good time. Many people in the group, if not potentially all of them, were drinking. And multiple members of the group also admitted to smoking weed about 90 minutes before the incident that we'll be talking about.
Oh no. It just as somebody who, Lake Town again, I got my boater's license, and that was like the first thing the instructor like slammed on the book and was like, do not drink before you operate a boat and do not smoke weed.
Yeah, so
oh no.
They're really just floating down. They're not operating any machinery or anything. And this is pretty common. When you go and do a float, or like when we would go in the canoe, it's like, yeah, you pack a 6-pack. Like, nothing wrong with that.
Fun, yeah.
Yeah, and they basically were just having their float and party down the river on a beautiful summer Saturday.
Yeah.
And while the young friend group is having fun in their afternoon, another group of friends were doing the same thing. And this group included 54-year-old Nicolae Miu. And Miu is from Prior Lake, Minnesota, and he went tubing with his wife and a handful of their friends. And they drove down to Somerset that morning from Prior Lake, which is just about a 2-hour drive. And a couple hours into their float, which sounded quite a bit more chill than the younger group's float, but they were still drinking. They kind of did the same thing, brought a cooler along with them, and we're all just kind of hanging out, chit-chatting and having some beers. And one of Miu's friends noticed that the waterproof bag that they kept their cell phone in was missing. And he thought maybe he dropped it in the river.
Oh.
Yeah, like that would be so frustrating.
Bad. Oh, no. Yeah.
But Miu offered to go back down the river with snorkel and goggles to see if he could find the phone. And so he actually separated from his group to go do this.
First of all, what a good friend. He's like, I got snorkels, I got goggles, we're finding these phones. But also, it makes me nervous. It makes me nervous that you said so he separated from his group.
He did. And
oh no.
Miu would pass many other tubers while searching for this phone. And one group in particular felt uncomfortable with him swimming and walking around in the water with goggles and a snorkel, not really realizing what he was actually doing. And, you know, I can understand that. I kind of think of it as like a parent being nervous seeing a man in a playground without a kid. Like, it could be innocent, but it's also smart to have your guard up because you just hear these terrifying horror stories.
Awful.
Yeah, and many of the people that were feeling uncomfortable were young women in bathing suits. So I can understand that, but also I can understand that like Miu's just trying to help his buddy out and he's not paying attention to those people.
Yeah, I can see why, like, especially if you're younger, if you were in your bathing suit, you're uncomfortable, and this
Mm-hmm.
guy's kind of wandering around, you don't know what he's up to.
Exactly. And I'm going to really try to keep the details clear here because we have a lot of different people involved from different groups at this point. So Miu's on his own. And the first group that I discussed with Isaac, AJ, Ryhley, Dante, and Tony, let's go ahead and just refer to them as Group A at this point.
I like it. Yeah.
Yeah, because I feel like there's a lot of people here and there's a lot of names I don't know. So I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
you are a cluster who came to float together. You are a cluster that came to float together.
A lot of a lot of different like names to keep straight and easier this way.
Exactly. So the first group, Group A, and then the group that felt uncomfortable with Miu, let's go ahead and refer to them as Group B. And members of Group A and B, they don't know each other. They're just fairly near each other on the river. Mm-hmm. And Miu is by them. And some members from Group B actually approach Group A, and I believe this is just because they're similar ages that they felt comfortable kind of going to them. But they were saying that they're creeped out because they didn't know what Miu was doing, and his behavior made them uncomfortable. Like, they didn't know if he was looking at them underwater with the goggles or what.
Yeah. And I get it. He's just trying to be a good guy, but you don't know what he's up to.
Exactly. And multiple members of Group B approach Miu. And they start calling him names like weirdo, raper, pedophile, predator. And then they just start yelling at him to get away.
Oh, that is some serious accusations there.
Mm-hmm. And so they just start yelling at him. And at this point, things escalate and move quickly. An argument ensues. And for the most part, up until this point, the eyewitnesses really kind of say the same thing and they follow the same timeline. But this is when things start to differ a little bit. Miu says that he tried to let the group know that he was just looking for the missing phone, while members of Group A and B say that he said he was, quote, looking for girls.
Okay. They say that he said that to them?
Yes. I would like to note that Miu has an accent, but I do not think those things are being confused for each other.
No, and that's, I mean, why would he tell you he was looking for girls?
Well, there's a lot of theories.
That just seems... Okay, I'll wait.
The biggest one is like a sarcastic snapback comment. Where it's like, of course I'm looking for girls. Like, are you kidding? Type of response.
Yeah, pedophile, predator. Like, I don't blame him for clapping back.
Or he never said it.
Yes,
like
also
that's the other like big possibility that people consider in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't know the answer. I'll tell you that right now. We don't know which one he actually said.
Okay.
We know what they both parties say he said.
Okay, yeah. Only from one point of view.
Exactly. And so Group A and B said that when they got in his face to tell him that he had to leave, like they were like almost chest to chest, face to face, he actually punched one of the girls who was confronting him.
Oh no. Is that confirmed? Like did
we'll talk about it.
Was there bruising? Okay, okay.
We'll definitely get there. I'm just trying this is like the picture of what we were reading in the news after it came out.
Okay.
And at a point, multiple people from both groups really surrounded Miu And they pushed him, and it ended up knocking him off of his feet into the water. And the water's not deep. It's maybe about a foot deep at this point.
Yeah.
But, like, that's still, like, you're knocking him over and making him fall over. And...
yeah, you're pushing him hard enough that he's falling into the river that might be full of rocks.
And he flat out says, like, I was tripping on rocks. That's why I fell to begin with. Like, I was pushed. But then my feet got tangled on some rocks that were there. And when I fell, I actually hit my head on a rock that was on the riverbed.
Oh.
But Miu would really deny that the punch happened. And some members of the group then start to punch him when he's down. And
wow.
He kept like trying, he said he kept trying to get back to his feet, and then he'd be pushed over again and knocking him down over and over. And they were trying to kick him in the water, and then they were trying to hold him down. And
whoa.
Yeah, and like they're all kind of saying that, like, yes, this happened, but all the kids are saying it's because he punched this girl in our group and we were trying to make sure he got away from her, and he's saying that he didn't punch her and that they're just attacking him. And so we don't really know what happened. And Miu was able to get himself back up as the two groups continue to call him a predator. And, like, there's so many people around him at this point, because both of these friend groups were large groups. Probably 10, 15 people each.
Wow.
And they are all kind of spread out. Like, not all 10, 15 people were in one group together and then the second one merged into it. Like, they're not all shoulder to shoulder around him, but there's still a lot of people that are kind of in a circle around him.
Right, witnessing, yeah.
And two girls from Group A approaches Miu, and they were really just about 2 feet from him, like less than an arm's distance away. And they're yelling at him, telling him that he needs to leave again. And at this point, Miu had a knife in his hand, and he began to stab them. So he stabbed one of the girls directly in front of him. And over the next handful of seconds, he would stab an additional 4 people from Group A.
Whoa.
So it's the 5 people the 5 people he stabbed were Isaac Schuman, AJ Martin, Ryhley Mattison, Dante Carlson, and Tony Carlson. And
so basically all of Group A.
Not all of them. It's the ones I mentioned in the beginning, but they had almost 10 other friends with them. The numbers are constantly reported differently, but a general estimate seems to be 10.
Okay, wow. All right.
And Isaac Schuman, who was 17 at the time, would actually die from his injuries.
17.
Yes, he was one of the youngest in the group.
Oh, man. And I get it from his point of view. Like, he doesn't know more information, so he's just trying to protect these girls, but he's only 17, so he doesn't know what he's walking into.
Well, that's a big part of what happened here is I have no clue who started saying those things about Miu. But once one person does, when you're all kind of spread out on the river, you might not be hearing everything that's actually going on. And when you hear one of your buddies start screaming at somebody who's kind of waiting around the water in goggles around likely other teenage girls, calling him a pedophile.
That's, I just have such a relationship with words, and to be called a pedophile and a predator and
Yeah.
like that's
That's a big deal.
that's pretty intense. It's pretty intense. It's a big deal. I mean, does it warrant any of this? Absolutely not. But that's a big deal, a big accusation.
It's a huge accusation, and like you and I are trying to be incredibly careful with our words because we talk about this stuff, and we want to make sure the words that we're saying fit the situation accurately.
Yeah.
And these were very much insults thrown out there without information.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so after this, the police are called by bystanders. And it's just about 4 p.m., so it's still light out, and there's still a lot of people tubing down the river on Saturday afternoon. And
I hope they can find everyone.
Once police and EMS show up, Miu was taken into custody without incident. He was just a little further down the river because he ended up joining back with his crew and just going a little further, like out of the way of everything.
Wow.
And
that's whew.
Yeah, we'll get to some more detail on kind of what actually happened when he kind of left the situation. But I did see some body cam footage from when he was sitting in the police car talking to an officer. And Miu says, quote, "I hear somebody got stabbed and I fit the description." Which just, yeah.
I was gonna say, that's an interesting statement.
Yeah.
You hear somebody got stabbed? Okay.
I rewound this like 7 or 8 times because I'm like, I didn't hear this right. Because the cop is kind of talking over him a little bit when he says, "I fit the description." So it was kind of hard to make out. But I listened to it so many times. I'm like, he said it. He said it.
Yeah, you're like, this is no joke. Like, this man is out here on the Tubin River, trying to ruin everyone's picnic.
Yeah, like that was so weird to me.
I support whatever people want to tell the police, especially once they've been read their Miranda rights. But this seems like a bad move.
I will say he had not been read his Miranda rights yet. We will actually talk about when that happens later on. But no, he just he was right that there was a description of him and he fit the description. So the police went to go talk to him, asked if he'd sit in the car. I couldn't tell if there were handcuffs on him. He kind of had his hands together in his lap. But I couldn't see if he was wearing handcuffs, but he was in a position where he could have been. Yeah. So I don't know if he like they said he was under arrest or anything, or if they just asked him to like come off to the side and we can ask you a few questions. Please sit in the car type of thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
But there was a video released of his first interrogation, and I watched all of that. It was about an hour long, and the lieutenant walks in, and he's just sitting there at the table in the interrogation room. She asks him if he wants water, if he'd like any food. And he says that he has water and he really isn't hungry. But he was really thirsty earlier. And he's glad that he has water now because he was on the river drinking beer all day.
Ooh.
Yeah. That, like, it was just such a casual, like, yeah, I'm good, I'm not hungry. But, like, yeah, water was just nice. I was just drinking a lot earlier.
Oh, no.
And the lieutenant just really at this point starts to do some background information. You know, they want to get his address, his phone number, his education level, career, talk about a spouse, you know, like kind of the basic stuff. And she's literally filling out a form, like filling in these questions as they're going through it. And he eventually kind of interrupts her as she's getting more in depth about his career, saying like, I don't want to talk about myself. Like, I want to know what's going on. Like, how bad is this situation?
Oh. That's bad. You should have just asked for a lawyer, my guy.
Well, this is
Because
where
asking a cop.
he wasn't read his Miranda rights at this point. This is actually where she brings up the Miranda rights. So she actually says, like, we can't talk about that yet because I need to go over this with you. And she went line by line with the Miranda rights on paper of, like, can you check off this line to make sure you understand what I'm telling you? And really did what she needed to do to make sure that he was read them and legally covered.
Right.
And he asked a few questions about, like, I don't think I have money for a lawyer. Like, what's the process like to get a public defender? Like, they went through that process and she walked him through everything. And he agreed, like, I'll go ahead and I'll talk right now. And she made it super clear, like, you have the right to stop this and get a lawyer.
Yeah.
Like,
please, you have the right to stay silent.
Yeah. And she made that very, very clear to him. But he's like, I want this over with. Like, I want to go back to my life. Like, I'll tell you anything you need to know. And he was being very kind of casual about it in the way of, like, seemed like he really thought that, like, explaining everything, he'd be able to go without question.
That seems like so many cases we've been covering lately. Like, we just did Seth Pravaki. They think they can just go back to their normal life.
Well, this is a very different situation than Seth Pravaki because I think as we go through this, you'll see that he potentially really does have a claim at self-defense. Like, you heard how these kids treated him and surrounded him. And the question is, did he have a real fear for his life in that moment? And he was being pushed and held down and watered. And we'll get more into that as we go.
Okay.
Because we will discuss the trial. And we have some additional evidence that is brought up during the trial that we'll go in depth in.
Okay.
But she said that there's still a couple things, does the Miranda rights, and he, again, seems very casual having the background conversation. And it didn't really raise a red flag to me. Like, the thing in the car was really weird, but he was being very clear and concise and trying to make sure he was answering her correctly. And she was asking him a lot of spelling and that, you know, just like, it was like very basic paperwork. He seemed just like he knows he needs to get it done in his procedure.
Right.
And he kind of gives a little laugh at one point. And this is when she's, like, bringing up, like, we can't do that yet. Like, we need to do the Miranda rights and finish this paperwork.
Right.
And the laugh is a little odd. It's uncomfortable. It's kind of an uncomfortable laugh. And the only reason I'm pointing it out is because we're going to discuss some more things coming up here and other people's interviews and things that seem odd to me. And this was something where it's like, I can kind of see it because it seemed like uncomfortable. Like, let's just get on with it. I want to be done with the procedural stuff and move on to the stuff that you're actually here to talk about so I can leave. But it also could have been really just weird. And I don't know. It's one of those situations where it's like, how much do you really judge it? Because he just did go through a traumatic event.
Yeah. I mean, I know just from myself that anytime I go through something traumatic or something bad happens, I really try to make light of it, and I might laugh at inappropriate times.
Well, that's kind of where it's like, I'm trying to remind that in the back of my head, but I noticed the laugh to the point where it's like, ooh.
Ooh, yeah.
But it could be a nervous and defense mechanism, and I think that it's important we keep that in mind. So the detective starts to say that, starts going in asking him what happened on Apple River that afternoon, and that after going through his Miranda rights, he has the ability to stop the interview. She really, like, dug that in. She said it numerous times.
Yeah.
And he very quickly, after she kind of reiterates this, says it was self-defense. and that they, quote, produced 2 weapons and I had took one from them.
Huh.
And so she kind of pauses, and he continues saying, like, they approached him, they hit him, they were on top of him, and that he doesn't really remember a whole ton after that because it happened so fast and a lot happened.
And he hit his head on a rock, potentially.
He hadn't said it at this point, but he will bring that up. And I'm not going to go like super deep into this interrogation because it was an hour long, but there's definitely some things I really want to point out. And one thing that I found odd, right after he said it was self-defense and that the large group had approached him, he started calling him a child molester. And his response to these kids, he said to them that if he was a child molester, they shouldn't be drinking.
Okay.
I don't get the logic.
What? Like, you're drunk, so that makes it okay for me to peep on you. But also, we don't know. He was just trying to find the phones, and he starts getting accused of all this crazy shit. But also, now he's kind of walking it back.
But then he moves on from that really quickly. So it was like he almost kind of realized he shouldn't have said that, so he changes the subject and just moves on. But like,
he was like, oops.
That was really weird, and I still don't understand.
Yes.
But what you just said, where it's like, oh, you guys were drinking, so like that's kind of your fault. That's the same impression I got.
Yeah.
It was weird though. It was definitely weird.
It is.
And he went on to say that one of the guys produced a small knife, while another produced what looked like a kitchen knife. I feel like a kitchen knife is an insane variety of sizes, depending on who you talk to.
Yeah.
So I don't know what that means.
Yeah. I was going to say kitchen knife, like that could be anything from like
knife?
A serrated...
bread knife.
A steak knife, a serrated blade, like, or something that you cut your chicken with. Like, whoa.
Yeah, I still don't have an answer to that, but he described it as a chicken knife. A kitchen knife, excuse me.
Okay.
And he said that the kid with the small knife attacked him, but he was able to like grab his wrist and get the knife from him. And he doesn't know what happened to either knife at the end of all of it.
Okay. Well, one thing it's a little bit of a sidetrack, but my husband has always told me, I had a knife for a while that I carried around Chicago, because y'all know Chicago. And my husband told me that I should stop carrying it because it's too easy for an attacker to overpower you and take that knife from you.
A knife is one of those weapons that is really easy to harm yourself while using as well. Yeah, so a knife is one of those things where it's like it could be beneficial, but it could also be very terrible.
Yeah, damaging.
But he goes on to explain that he'd separated from his group, came across the larger group of teenagers and young adults. He said that a member of his group lost his phone in this waterproof bag, and that he was thinking maybe it fell off the tube, maybe even sank, and so he grabbed a mask and a snorkel and just started looking. And he had seen someone in this group of teenagers and young adults that had a waterproof bag and a phone in it that looked like it might have been the one his friend had. So he approached the group asking if they had found it, and he asked if he could see the one that the guy was holding just to check, make sure it wasn't his friend's. And this is when they began to harass him.
Oh no.
He says that they knocked the mask and snorkel out of his hand, and that the current of the river actually started to take it. So he kind of like went after it away from them for a moment, and it put some distance in between him and the group. And he started to walk away, but then the group behind him started getting loud, and they started yelling. And this is when they started calling him like a raper and a pedophile and a predator.
Ugh.
And he said that he returned to the group because he heard the yelling. He didn't quite know what they were saying at that point. He returned to them thinking like maybe they had it and they actually were hiding it from him and this was all a joke. So that's why they were getting loud and kind of laughing with each other. And when he turned back, this is when they actually really attacked him.
Okay.
And Miu begins to explain what happened after the attack. He said that he was able to get away and rejoin his group, and that he did tell that his group that he was attacked and had told them that he actually didn't want to talk about it. And the way that he put it to the lieutenant really made it sound like he was ashamed that he got attacked by teenagers.
Yeah, I kind of get that.
And yeah, he's like, I didn't want to have to talk about that. Like, a group of teenagers just knocked me down in the water.
I want to talk about a 20-year-old just swept my feet and made me hit my head on a rock. I get it.
Yeah, and his group noticed that there was commotion happening, and they noticed that he was being kind of extra quiet and that this was kind of weird for him. But they kind of looked back and they saw commotion happening with the large group of teens and the young adults. And they thought that these groups were fighting amongst each other. And at this point, Miu asked the detectives if she could tell him what happened. So they haven't even had the conversation of that 5 people were stabbed and that one person died.
Wow.
And so she tells him 4 people were taken to the hospital and 1 of them died. But at this point, she doesn't know what any of the injuries were. She doesn't say stabbed. I don't know if she does know or doesn't know. But she's telling him she doesn't know. And Miu responds with, "Oh my God." But he doesn't really have a whole lot of facial expression. He remains having eye contact with the detective. But then he follows up and he asks her, is that because they fought each other? So he's kind of going back to what he was saying earlier.
Yeah.
And it's like, you can kind of see this whole thought process, but at the same time, I don't know if I buy it.
I don't know if I do either, because it seems like he's kind of pretending to have this, like, amnesia or selective memory. Like, I feel like I would remember stabbing 5 people.
Well, I do understand, like, the blacking out moments, even that quickly after. I do get that. But I feel like he's saying he's blacking out, but then he's giving details.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he all of a sudden has a lot to say. I would get the blacking out more if they had, like, held him underwater for longer.
Well, I get the emotional blacking out, not even because of, like, lack of oxygen or anything. Like, I do very much believe that is a thing, and it is a trauma response, and that absolutely could have been the scenario. But I think he's peppering in so many details of when he said he blacked out that makes it seem more like an excuse to me than the truth.
Yeah. Because you start... We've talked about this before. You start a lie, and then you just start to add a lot more details to your lie to make it sound believable.
Exactly.
But, yeah, it ain't.
Yeah, and the detective responds again, saying that she knows no additional details. She doesn't know injuries or anything. And this is the point in the interrogation where you can actually see kind of a physical reaction in Miu. He leans his head forward, puts his hands on his head, and he kind of starts to breathe deeply and more loud. And there's more that happens in it. They kind of, like, regroup a little bit, and get to more procedural conversation after this. But I watched a different interview, which is with 25-year-old Ryhley Mattison. And this was a couple days after the incident. And Ryhley
he's brave.
Was stabbed in the stomach. And she recalled the event for Fox 9 Minneapolis St. Paul news station. And so this is a local news, but pretty big. Minneapolis, St. Paul, big city. And
and like we've said before, sometimes the local news is the best.
And a lot of my resources in this episode come from Fox 9. They had a lot of footage of the trial, and the trial was televised, so I got to watch quite a bit of it.
Okay.
And she mentions in this interview basically right away that her memory is a bit blurry because she was definitely drinking quite a bit that day. And she says that she was the first person to be stabbed by Miu. And she says that she was in a group of 10 or 11 people, and that the second group, who, as we kind of stated earlier, these two groups did not know each other, told them that they felt uncomfortable because of this older man who was Nicolae Miu. And Ryhley's group kind of split into two. Some approached Miu and some kind of stayed back by the tubes. And the majority of the girls stayed back, and the guys went towards the other group and then towards Miu.
Okay.
And one of Ryhley's friends, who she doesn't name, was speaking with Miu, and she can't quite remember who approached who, but she said that her friend told Miu that he had to leave and get away from them, and it was being very loud in his face telling him this. And then Miu punched her friend in the face while she's trying to make him go, which kind of matches what was in the news and everything. And then she says her memory gets a bit more fuzzy. She doesn't remember if she said something to Miu or if she had even hit him. But after he had supposedly punched her friend, Miu had turned towards Ryhley and did a quick jabbing motion and stabbed her in the stomach.
My God.
She says she initially thought that she was punched until she saw the blood. And she doesn't remember seeing the others get stabbed. She says that she started kind of just walking around asking people in the water like what to do, and she said that she felt like she was dying. And
oh my God.
Ryhley concluded the interview saying that at the moment that there are certainly moments of sadness going through all of this, but overall she's really just angry because people just don't care about each other and that the world is just getting sadder and sadder.
This poor girl. Like, she watched him punch her friend in the face. I would want to get involved, but then she had no idea how dangerous he was.
Well, I will tell you, this interview really rubbed me the wrong way.
Oh?
I understand where you're coming from, having not actually watched it and just kind of listening to the summary of it.
Right.
But it was 6 days after the incident that had killed one of her friends and wounded 3 others. And she was so casually talking about it as if she was just like telling a buddy what happened at the party over the weekend.
Oh, man.
And I said this earlier, people respond to trauma in different ways. And I think that's incredibly important to acknowledge. And in my personal thoughts, which could be completely irrelevant, it didn't sit right with me. At points, she's kind of smiling a little bit, which again, could be a defense mechanism. But from my point of view, it seemed like it was really like she was just telling the story that didn't have huge consequences that came from it.
Oh, yeah.
And at the point where she was explaining after she had been stabbed and she was walking around and what she should do, that was at the point where she kind of like smirked and laughed a little. Where it was like, can you believe that
Oh.
happened? It kind of felt like to me.
Oh.
Yeah, it just personally really rubbed me the wrong way. I will say the comments on the video on YouTube really don't like her. I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to read any of them out loud because I don't agree with a lot of them. A lot of them were just very harsh and insulting and blamed her for a lot of
Mm.
stuff. I don't believe in that.
Yeah. I do see why it rubbed you the wrong way, though, because her friend died.
Mm-hmm. That was one thing I
And
will say is like, I feel like in this whole situation, Isaac's death very much got lost.
yeah, 17-year-old boy.
Mm-hmm. And that's one reason why I said at the top, like, I think this is so sad. And we're not even
Yeah.
into a lot of these details here, but like, I think we both can say that, like, there's a lot of things that both parties did that we don't
Hmm.
agree with. And that
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
wish were different scenario, which could have prevented all of this from happening. And
Yeah, just like you said at the top.
yeah, and I hope that we can have this conversation and reflect on the fact that somebody was killed and that Isaac was killed, and I never want to see
Yeah,
this happen again because it's avoidable.
absolutely. And like I mean, smirk and like laugh a little when you know that your friend has died due to this.
Hmm.
That I see why it rubbed you the wrong way.
And another thing that kind of bothered me was the last statement in her interview. She discussed
Hmm.
anger about people not caring for each other. And I'm making an assumption here, but I'm assuming she's talking stranger to stranger. And
Hmm.
their willingness, a stranger to stranger, and their willingness to hurt and kill other people. And the reason this rubs me the wrong way is because everyone kind of acknowledges that they were verbally harassing Miu.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that.
And that's
They
not caring
really
stranger to
were.
stranger. Like, that's not caring for
No,
each other.
yeah. We've said it, I've said it a million times, but those are serious things that they were screaming at him in front of multiple people.
Yeah, and even if they were in a situation, and I'm not saying that this isn't the case, because I think that it very much could be, where they really thought that he
Uh-huh.
was trying to spy on them and watch them and really be very much a creep. I don't know if that's the case
Uh-huh.
or not, but their perception of it, I can understand. I still
Yeah.
wouldn't
Yeah. As a
be
young
screaming for dozens of people. Like, I would try potentially make a scene, but not
yeah.
necessarily in that way because I don't have the confidence that that's what's happening.
Yeah, I get it, like a young girl being disturbed, being a little afraid, but I don't know if that warrants calling someone a rapist and a pedophile. Like he didn't even touch you.
Well, it's like it's I think a lot of us know, like, girl code. If you're out
Hmm.
somewhere and you see somebody who is creeping you out and making you uncomfortable, I've had strangers come up to me, other women, who are like, can we
Hmm.
just chat for a minute? Like, pretend I'm meeting up
Yeah.
with you. Where it's like,
Yeah.
I get
Yeah.
it. And they'll say something like, there's this guy, he's wearing this behind me. You might be able to see him. I'm uncomfortable. Can we just like stand and chit chat in public for a minute? And
Right.
I've
And that's why
it's important to allow
I
that, I think.
yeah, absolutely. I've seen a lot of bars lately come up with women who feel uncomfortable in their date, and you
Mm-hmm.
can go to the bartender and ask for an angel
Yep.
shot, and they know what you mean is I'm uncomfortable, I'm frightened, this guy needs to go.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's like, I think a lot of women just kind of know the girl code. And so, like, that's the sort of thing that
Yeah.
my brain would go to, which you can kind of say that Group B did by approaching the other group saying, I'm uncomfortable, but that other group immediately jumping to those verbal harassing allegations. I
Yeah,
can't,
yeah.
I don't know if I can agree with that. I can't.
Yeah, without trying to figure out what it was he was actually doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Miu would be charged with first-degree homicide, attempted first-degree homicide, and battery charges. And his trial would take place in April of 2024. So it was very recent.
Ooh. Yeah.
And Miu would stick to his self-defense claims. And we would learn that some things he said during his interrogation were not correct.
Okay.
The biggest thing was that we will learn that the knife that he used to stab Isaac, AJ, Ryhley, Dante, and Tony actually did belong to Miu. And that it was his pocket knife that he was carrying with him that day. And that none of the other groups were armed.
Oh, that is unarmed group of young children, and I understand carrying a pocket knife.
I do too.
But I've never I just mentioned, disarming a knife is easy, but I've taken it on the dog walk with me, and I have always hoped against hope that I would never have to use it.
Well, I will say, so I don't think he had the pocket knife on him for protection. I'm pretty sure of that. Because one common thing that you would do tubing, if you're like in a big group, is you tie your tubes together with twine. And he makes a comment during his interrogation, like, I did have a pocket knife. He says he left it in his car at that point. He says he didn't actually have it with him on the river. But he's like, yeah, we tied them up. I cut the twine with my knife. I put it back in the car. And I think that's all probably pretty legit, because I've seen photos of the tubes. They are tied with twine. Like, I don't know if he actually had the knife on him for anything other than that.
For like, do you know if he had the knife on him for the altercation?
It was his knife. He never put it back. Like, he's told investigators he did. So he just, he had it like in the pocket of his swimsuit. Which again, that to me doesn't seem weird in itself. Especially someone growing up where it's like, you go camping and you go canoeing and you go tubing and like you do all of this sort of stuff. Like, a knife comes in quite handy for non-violent purposes. Yeah. So
exactly,
like, to me, it's
and just
not
like
weird
I said, I carried one.
Yeah, like no self-defense, I think, was going through his mind when he put that knife in his pocket.
Right.
But
it was just like camping essentials.
Yeah.
Or tubing essentials.
Exactly. And for the first time during the trial, we were actually able to see a cell phone video that was taken by one of the members of Isaac, AJ, Ryhley, Dante, and Tony's group. And Kelly, we can watch it. I'm going to tell you, you do not have to.
I already have it up.
Do you want me to give you a very brief description of it? Because I will say it is graphic content.
Okay.
If anyone...
No worries. We've done many graphic cases, and I feel prepared.
Yeah, it's about 3 minutes long, but I do just want to say, if you choose to watch it, it's going to be in our show notes. I am going to label it graphic content so that you know before you even click. Just please be warned. It is something that when I first watched it, it really upset me. But yeah, after you watch it, I have the key points kind of laid out here that we can discuss.
It's over now, and the last thing, I made it to the end of the video, and they're clearly reacting to his stabbing. And just like Sam said, there's some graphic content in there. You do see some of the stuff that's happening. It's very upsetting seeing that young man in the water, kind of just holding his midsection.
Yeah, it's definitely not an easy watch. And
yeah, it's short, but it gets the point across.
Yeah, and let's go through and kind of talk about what happens for the people who choose not to watch it, because I kind of wish I didn't watch it, but I watched it a lot today, unfortunately.
Yeah, that'd be great, because there's a lot of voices, just like you said, kind of talking, and it'd be good to recap.
Yeah, I watched this far too many times today, so I could write this recap. So
I understand.
Please feel free not to watch it if you think it might upset you, because we will talk about it in depth here. And it begins with Miu kind of running up to the group of tubers that the young group was using. And right as he runs up, he drops his mask and his snorkel and kind of begins to look around and like walk around the tubes a little bit more. And to me, it looks like he might actually be looking for a phone. Like, he's kind of looking down in the water, like in the tubes. And you can hear multiple people talking loudly in the background and laughing. I couldn't...
Yeah, almost like they're mocking him.
Yeah, I couldn't exactly tell what they were saying, but it seemed like they were kind of laughing at the situation and him running around. And I would like to know, I think that they had prior exchanges up until this point, which is why the person who recorded the video started to record, because they're like, what's this guy doing? Like, this is really weird. I should record this.
Yeah. That makes sense.
And some people are you can hear them saying, like, get away from us. And he does begin to walk away from the group. He actually is walking in the opposite direction of them.
Yeah.
And the group turns up their music. They begin to yell. And you hear them saying, like, walk away and pedo. And he kind of stopped walking at this point, and they float up to him, it looks like. Like, he doesn't walk back towards them. It's just the flow of the river brought them towards them.
Yeah.
And a young woman walks up and tells him he has to go. Okay. And people near the camera start yelling. He said he was looking for little girls. And Miu's really just kind of standing there. He's not responding. Everyone's yelling, and they begin to gather around him. And Miu then starts to wave at some people in the distance, which I think is his group of friends that were like a decent way down the river, but he could kind of see them. And then the video kind of pans around a bit, and I tried to count how many people were like right around Miu at this point. It was hard to tell. It was moving fast. I would say 10 to 15.
I agree. Because they had him at the horseshoe shape first, where they were kind of surrounding him, and he's trapped by the tubes. But then later in the video, they've got him fully ringed.
Yeah. And this is like what's directly around him. There's a lot more people that are like off in the distance too. So it's like, this is just the circle around him.
Yeah.
And they're all laughing and kind of yelling over each other. And Miu's just like, he's just literally standing there. That's it.
Yeah.
And you see him fall into the water, and it's kind of in the corner of the frame. It does look like he was pushed, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I think he was probably pushed and lost his footing, which is what he said. But it was hard to like tell, because it was like as the phone was turning. So it was...
Yeah. It was kind of out of frame.
Yeah.
What led him to fall, but I agree with you that it was likely a push and a slip on a rock, because those river rocks get slippery.
Exactly. And he was wearing like slide sandals. So like, who knows what that material is going to be like on a slimy rock.
Yeah. And
once he's down in the water, you can actually see that he is hit in the head. Somebody punches him.
Yeah.
And that somebody else on the other side of him like pushes his shoulders down further into the water.
Yeah, I understand so much of this video is troubling, but that was very scary to me because it's just not river etiquette. It's just
it's not human being etiquette. Like,
exactly. Like, you don't try to drown someone or at least seriously injure them when you're already screaming at them. You've got them surrounded. Like, just not to take his side here, because he did kill a 17-year-old boy, but maybe you feel like you've won. I don't know.
Well, my big thing with all of this is Miu had numerous times where he could have walked away. When he was just standing there, letting everyone kind of surround him, he just stood there silently. He didn't try to take a step. He didn't do anything to make it look like he was going to be the adult in the situation and walk away.
Right. He just stands there and let them hurl abuse and think over what's going to happen.
Yeah, and even like as he was first walking away and they floated up to him, like he stopped walking, like, keep going, man. Like,
just keep going. Find your friends downriver. Keep going.
Yeah, and so there were numerous possibilities where it would never have escalated to even to the point of being pushed.
Yeah, and you make a great point, which is like, be the adult in this situation.
Yeah. But he after someone kind of like shoves him down in the water, he's able to get back up to his feet. But he was pushed down basically right away again. And you can see the second time when he gets up that he actually has the knife in his hand. And I
didn't see that. I gotta watch it again.
Yeah, you can actually see that he has it because it's in his right hand, which is the hand that's facing the camera. And he holds his arm kind of tight at his side, and he kind of like holds it along his thigh. And it's hard to tell because the camera's moving a lot at this point. But before he fully fell the second time, I think that may have potentially been the first stab. It's kind of hard to tell because it is off the edge of the frame. You don't actually see the stab happen in frame for any of them.
No, but you do see the aftermath, folks. And it happens so fast, just like you said.
So fast. And we'll get into the speed in just a moment. But he gets up again. And he starts to yell, and somebody in the background starts to yell that he hit a woman. And he quickly jabs the knife twice. And again, it's like a fraction out of frame. So you don't actually see what and who he was stabbing. But since the movement, he was pushed or fell into the water for the first time. This all happened within 25 seconds.
Wow.
So that first push and fall to all 5 stabbings is 25 seconds.
Damn. Oh, boy. That's so fast.
It's so incredibly fast. He was down, I believe, 2 or 3 times in the water. Like, and having to stand back up in that time and had stabbed 5 people. So that's that type of situation where it's like, that kind of sounds like flight or fight type of response.
Yeah. And he was surrounded, so maybe he chose fight. And in this case, unfortunately, so many people were injured and a young man died.
Mm-hmm. And at this point, everyone starts to kind of back up and step backward, realizing that like something serious just happened. And you see somebody in the water wearing yellow swimming trunks, and he's clearly been stabbed in the stomach.
Yeah.
And the water is just turning red. And people begin to scream. This is one of the things that was the hardest for me to watch, was the people realizing what just happened and how serious it is, and how their screams began to escalate.
Yeah. Do we know if, first of all, Sam's totally correct. It's, I mean, if you watch this video, be careful. You're gonna see some very sad stuff and graphic stuff. Do we know if the young man in swim trunks was Isaac?
I don't believe so. I believe he was wearing blue swim trunks.
Okay.
I had some trouble like identifying everyone in the video. So
there were tons of people.
There were a lot of people, and like you see them in their like suit and tie in the courtroom, and they're like wet in a bathing suit in a blurry cell phone video that's moving very fast. So there were some that was kind of difficult to tell, but I believe I saw photos that said was Isaac, where he was wearing blue swim trunks. So no, I don't believe so.
Good on the friend for realizing, like, something's happening here. Something's not right. Let me take out my camera and record this.
Yeah, and he said that in court, where they asked him, why did you start recording? And his response was like, this just was too weird. Like, this was uncomfortable, and I just felt like I had to film it. And he filmed the whole thing.
When something like that. Yeah.
We said that the attack is 25 seconds. The video's 4 minutes. There's a lot more that happened before and after that he filmed.
And the reaction, just like Sam said, is very disturbing, just with people starting to realize and beginning to scream. Be prepared.
Yeah, that was like, we're used to seeing, like, I'm a big horror movie fan. Like, obviously I know reality versus fiction, but you do kind of become desensitized, especially when I knew I was going into this graphic video that showed the incident. I mentally prepared for that part of it. What I didn't prepare for was that follow-up, those moments of realization that lasted about another minute after the attack.
And thank you for prepping me before I went in, because Sam's right. We do see a lot of graphic stuff. We do see a lot. But this one feels a little different because everybody's so young, and we know a young man passed away. And to hear the group's reactions,
it was hard. It was very hard.
Yeah.
And one thing this video really told me was that it's very much a blend of the stories that we've heard so far. It's kind of everyone has pieces of truth in this.
Yeah.
And Miu would take the stand in his own defense.
Oh.
And, well, that's... Okay. He's pleading self-defense, so he needs to explain why...
Yeah.
Why he feared for his life.
Yeah.
And...
Right.
His statements would match the video fairly well, as we can kind of see. There were a lot of things that he did say during that initial interrogation, other than the knife not belonging to him. But a lot of it does match up a decent amount.
Yeah.
And he talked about, like, being pushed, falling over, being hit, held down. But when it came to the cross-examination, the prosecution focused on what happened before the stabbings, because their goal is to determine primary aggressor. Right. And if they are able to determine that Miu was the primary aggressor, he has no self-defense claim to make. So that was their tactic and their goal.
Fair.
And the video shows that, as we mentioned, he really just stood there for a while before being pushed. Longer than it took him to actually do the stabbings.
Yes, yeah.
As we said, he didn't try to walk away. He didn't try to de-escalate. He didn't even try to say anything to verbally defend himself from the accusations they were throwing at him.
Yeah, which is just like another thing, like, be the adult here, de-escalate this.
And I would like to note as well, like, he very quickly admitted he was drinking to the police and in that interrogation. So he's definitely not on, like, the sober when they're all the drunk ones. Like, they're all kind of in the same situation here.
Yeah.
But, like, you can give him a little bit, like, okay, maybe he's not going to be as adult acting while drunk. That's fair.
Yeah, when not sobered up. Yeah, I think that's fair too.
I think on both ends of this, it's like, okay, someone in this teenage group started this and numerous joined in.
Yeah.
And so that's that not good. That's upsetting to me.
No, that makes me sad too, because teenagers are just such the type to be like, come on, man, yeah, we'll fight. And they don't realize how dangerous.
Well, it's the mob mentality as well.
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh, my friend's doing it, so I'll do it too. And I'm sure the alcohol and potential weed takes a huge part in that as well.
Yeah, and like Sam said, there were like 10 to 15 people there, so mob mentality is not ruled out.
And he, at this point, is when he also admitted that he was the only person with the knife. So he was the only person actually armed with a weapon. And I think this is what really hurt him in this case. Because he was found guilty on all counts. His counts were slightly downgraded from his initial charges. But he was found guilty on 1 count of first-degree reckless homicide, 4 counts of first-degree recklessly endangering safety, and 1 count of battery.
Okay.
So the prosecution did their job with saying that, like, he had the weapon. He did nothing to stop this incident from happening when there were numerous opportunities. So we can label him as the primary aggressor because there's also the video doesn't show him punching anyone, which is supposedly what caused them to knock him into the water. So on July 31st, 2024, literally days ago.
Yeah.
Which was 2 years and 1 day after the stabbings, Nicolae Miu was sentenced to a total of 20 years in prison. So he was sentenced to 20 years for the first-degree reckless homicide. And then he was sentenced to additional time for the first-degree recklessly endangering safety and the count of battery. But they are being served concurrently. So 20 years will be his time in jail, despite...
I don't love that.
Well, I don't hate it. I don't. I think he could have served up to like 90 something years with maximum penalties and consecutive sentences.
Yeah.
But the reason I don't hate it is because everyone's kind of in the wrong here.
Yeah.
But do I think that Nicolae
Yeah.
Miu's actions in stabbing 5 people is worse? Yes. Do I believe that he deserves to be charged with these counts and serve prison time? Yes, I do. But I also think that he wouldn't have potentially been in this situation if he wasn't surrounded and harassed.
Yeah, if he hadn't put himself there, if he had just walked away to where his friends were, this didn't have to happen.
And I get it. Like I don't want this to sound like I'm blaming these kids who are victims, because they should never ever have gone through this. And it, like, with these things happening, it, like, if someone were to for some reason approach me and say the same sort of things, I absolutely am not going to be whipping out a knife in front of them and harming them. Like, that is absolutely not okay, regardless of what they were saying to him. So that's why I think he deserves to go to prison. But I also, I never want to see people treat somebody else like they treated him.
Yeah, they were treating him poorly, like in aggressive language. No one's right, just like you said. But I agree with you. I don't want to feel like we're blaming these teenagers, because they did not deserve this.
Yeah, and I think if he wasn't pushed into that situation and had that sort of mental response, because I can understand. We said how quickly this all happened, where he was pushed down and shoved underwater. I can understand his thought that they might try to kill him. I can.
Yeah. Especially if you hit your head on a rock.
Yeah, so that's why I'm like, I can't argue with the 20 years. Like, it's not a ton of time, but he's going to be in the 70s getting out.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's fine over 90 years, which he could have gotten. I think that's basically the minimum. I'm not upset with that.
Yeah, I think he's lucky. Even though he's getting out in his 70s, he could have been there way longer.
Yeah. And, like, I watched a lot of the trial, and I watched his statement during sentencing, which there are a couple things that rubbed me the wrong way, but I do get the sense that he is sorry for the actions. And the one thing that really did kind of bother me is he kept referring to it as, like, the incident instead of saying, like, my actions.
The crime. Yeah, or my action. Yeah, the crime I committed, my actions. Yeah. Take ownership.
Exactly.
Take ownership.
But I will say, like, I do feel like he is sorry. Those could have been, like, tears of, like, oh, I just lost the next 20 years of my life. But I think he understands that he took somebody's life. And that's absolutely tragic. And not only that he took somebody's life, he took a 17-year-old boy's life. Like,
a 17, yeah. He wasn't even 18 yet. He wasn't even old enough to vote.
He was about to start his senior year of high school.
God. He didn't even get to finish high school. Ugh.
Yeah, like, this is so incredibly tragic. And I really, unfortunately, feel like Isaac gets lost in the conversation, because we spent a lot of time talking about everything else. But I do like want to remind people that, like, Isaac's life was lost in this situation. And as I said, I think this could have been avoided by both parties, and Isaac could be here.
And I'll have some things to say about that when we wrap up. But it does feel like his murder got lost.
Mm-hmm. And even like when I was trying to do this research, I like to go into backgrounds and personalities of the people involved. And this happened in 2022. Like, social media is everywhere. But I struggled to find stuff on Isaac. That's why I didn't put much in here, because I didn't find much and I didn't know what I could trust.
It's so sad.
And I feel like this case is very similar to the tree stand murders, which we covered that back in May of 2023. And
oh my goodness.
I know, I looked it up when we covered it.
May of 2023. Oh my gosh, it's August of 2024. Sorry. Anyway.
Yeah, no, I had the same thought because I had to go look up when we covered it. But I feel like these cases have a lot in common. Like, first and foremost, they're both in Wisconsin. But if you haven't listened to those episodes yet, it was our first two-parter we ever did. Go and listen to them now, because I'm going to talk about the outcome. So either skip ahead just a couple minutes to our final thoughts, or just go ahead and listen to that one and come back later. But in that case, it was one singular person versus a group of people. And the group of people had shown some aggression, not deadly aggression, but some aggression. But they were not considered to be the main aggressor in the eyes of the law. The singular person was.
Okay, yeah. Yeah.
And in the end, all of the evidence that was reviewed by each individual jury determined that deadly action was not a result of the self-defense that they were claiming. And I'll say, this is definitely a jury I don't want to be on. Because I can see both sides of this. This would be so hard to make a decision. But I said it earlier, I agree with the conviction. And I think a big part of that as well are the lies about the knife. Yeah. That upset me. And the fact that it took less than 30 seconds for him to stab 5 people, killing one of them. And then he just kind of ran off back with his group.
Yeah. They found him downriver.
Yeah. And then the response in the car right afterwards saying, I heard somebody got stabbed and I fit the description. Like...
Yeah, I heard somebody got stabbed. Like, you were there, man.
Yeah. So I can't justify Miu's actions. And while I can understand at least a fraction of his thoughts when it comes to self-defense and potentially fearing for his safety, he deserves the conviction he received, in my opinion, and could have handled the situation without any sort of deadly force.
Absolutely.
But Kelly, what are your thoughts?
Gosh, I just agree with you. And after seeing that video, none of this had to happen. But I will say, I do not like that his charges were downgraded, specifically the first-degree reckless homicide, because he murdered Isaac. And I think he should serve the charges of murder.
He is.
Not just reckless homicide, like, oops, I stabbed him, but like, no, you stabbed him maliciously, a 17-year-old boy. And I mean, 20 years in prison is a lot, but I do think that they should have kept that charge on the table.
Well, the reason why, because they had a specific reason for changing it, and I agree with it.
Oh yeah,
is it was just first degree homicide was what he was initially charged with, and it was downgraded to reckless homicide because it was pretty clear to the prosecution that it wasn't as if he was trying to stab Isaac in particular. And I like that they kept it first degree because I think that's an important piece of it. But he was kind of wildly swinging the knife And that's where the reckless part comes in, which I do agree with. And the actions of wildly swinging the knife doesn't necessarily translate into I am purposely trying to murder somebody, but I am doing an action that has reckless result in potentially murder. And in this situation, it did. So he gets the homicide charge and the attempted homicide charges.
Right.
So I do,
for everyone else, yeah.
I do agree with the downgrade a little bit, which is another reason why, like, I'm kind of okay with the 20 years. If this happened as like a 30-year-old man doing this to these kids, I'd be a little more upset. But the fact that he's going to get out of prison in his 70s, he has had some health issues in the past that I didn't feel like was super important to get into in the story here. But it seems like he's transitioning into a healthier life, and he could easily get out at 70 and still have many years to enjoy the rest of his life. But he definitely deserves the time in prison.
Yeah, I think should he get out, he needs to spend whatever time he has left on this earth doing acts of service for other people, because he had the knife. He lied about having the knife, and he stabbed, just like you said, 5 people in less than 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And poor Isaac is getting forgotten here.
Yeah, he definitely will have probation, I believe, for another 6 years. So he'll probably be in his 80s once that's all said and done.
I just agree with you. Right before we hopped on recording, you were like, no one is right here.
Yeah.
And I was like, I kind of agree.
This was a hard one to cover because I think it's incredibly important for us to point out things that we find added to the situation as a whole. And unfortunately, one of those things comes from the behavior of those who were violently attacked. And we're not victim blaming here, but I'm nervous it will be taken as that, because I think in the end, still, Nicolae Miu's actions, despite their behavior, should not have resulted in stabbing 5 people and killing Isaac. Like,
absolutely not.
As simple as that. Like, their actions should not have led to this.
No, nothing should have led to this. And I just want to echo one more time that if you are in a situation like this and you are the adult, you have to take the adult way out, and you have to de-escalate that situation and walk away. There's no reason to fight a group of teenagers who are maybe acting out and yelling slurs, but like,
but
just go back to your
you live 2 hours away.
friends.
You're never going to see them again.
Yeah.
Never going to
I think that's what he thought.
Right. But like, say that in the fact of like, go ahead, call me whatever you want. Like, I'm out of here in a few hours.
Right.
And we're all going to go on with our lives in different directions.
It would have been so easy. It would have been so easy for this not to happen. And it makes me so sad because, once again, we've mentioned several times that Isaac's death is getting a little forgotten. And he was only a 17-year-old boy. We mentioned he couldn't even vote. He didn't even get to finish high school. And I just wanted to end on that note. Yeah. That a young man was killed.
Yeah, that shouldn't have been.
Yeah.
But thank you all for listening to Have You Heard About This Case? If you liked this episode, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, and you can follow our show on Spotify. You can now find us on YouTube at Have You Heard About This Case, on Instagram at Have You Heard About This Case Pod, on TikTok at HYHATC, or you can email us at haveyouheardaboutthiscase@gmail.com. Thanks, and we'll talk to you later.
See ya!